Hello and welcome to the WriteCome.com podcast, where we help you to make money from your words. Each episode will be sharing tips, tricks, and strategies you can use to make more money from your writing, publishing, and marketing to your fans and audience. Let's get started with your host, Barry J. McDonald.
Hi, this is Barry here, and you are very, very welcome to this podcast episode from WriteCome.com. And today I want to talk about an audiobook that I'm going through at the moment called That Will Never Work. Now, the audiobook is based on the origin story of Netflix, how it actually came about, and it's by Mark Randolph. He is one of the co-founders of Netflix and also the first CEO. Now, going through, an audiobook like that, when you see a business the way Netflix is now, the way it is a huge kind of digital platform, it's easy to think that it's always been that way. It's easy to think that everybody who worked on that business knew exactly what they were doing, that it was a golden idea that had come from some genius or, all these different things, that there was a kind of golden path that it kind of was following along, that there was never a mistake made, that they always knew what they were doing, and, it was something that couldn't go wrong. But listen to the audiobook. Now, at this moment, I'm only about halfway through it, so I haven't got to the part where it is moving over to the digital platform that it is. Right now, we are still in the early days of Netflix, when it was originally a DVD lending or kind of rental website. So for those of you who maybe don't know that is how Netflix actually started off. It was a DVD rental business before it became the huge platform that it is right now. Two of the points that I'm picking up right now at the moment that I'd probably like to talk about that I've noticed in this audiobook is that sometimes crazy ideas can have, money in them and can actually have maybe a great business idea. Now, the gentleman in question who is narrating the book, Mark Randolph, he actually talks about some of the crazy ideas he came up with before he actually came up with the idea of Netflix. He used to commute with another gentleman to work every day, and he used to always bounce ideas off this man. He used to come up with kind of weird and wacky ideas. One of the ideas he had come up with before Netflix was a business where they would make personalized baseball bats for fans of baseball. So basically what you would do is you would send them all your details, and maybe you would send what type of baseball bat you'd like made, but they would kind of personally make that baseball bat to you and probably engrave your name on it. And this is one of the ideas he had come up with as a business plan, or some business he could go into was selling personalized baseball bats. Another one then that he come up with, or that he was playing around with for a while, was personalized dog food. So somebody would probably give the details of their kind of breed of dog, or maybe kind of their diet requirements, and his company would be one of the ones who would create kind of personalized dog food for your dog. But that idea kind of got pushed, or kind of got stubbed out straight away when they realized, well, what would happen if somebody's owner or some owner's dog died, and it was because of their dog food? He imagined that the business wouldn't last too long. So the idea of how Netflix actually came about was a discussion they had one day in the car. The gentleman he was traveling around with, commuting with, he had said that he was just after paying a $40 fine to Blockbuster because he had a late fee on a videotape. Now, I don't know how long he had it lying around his house, but he paid $40 on it, and he was a bit pissed that he had to pay that much money for a late fee. So they're actually discussing about, things like returning videos. DVDs weren't even out at the time. They had originally planned to get into the business of renting videos and putting them through the mail before actually DVDs came about. But at the time, videos were too big, they were too bulky, and they would have cost too much in postage. And it wasn't a great kind of business idea. But the fact that Netflix came about just from a simple conversation the two people had in the car one day, it wasn't like one of these kind of religious moments or a moment from the Bible where you see a burning bush and you're given this kind of great tablet with this wisdom or this business idea. Sometimes crazy ideas can actually pay off in the long run. And, at any stage, the Netflix business could have fallen apart because a lot of things came up in the early days, and he does go into a lot of detail, and it's really, really interesting to see how it could have fallen apart. One of the examples was when they actually tested out the first DVD, rather than, they didn't actually have DVDs at the time, but they wanted to see if they could send send the DVD in the mail. So they bought an old I think it was a Patsy Cline CD or something like that, and one of them posted it to the other one just to see would it turn up to his house and would it turn up in a playable condition. And they were a bit naive in not realising that the sorting office that their two houses were connected to, the majority of the postal workers did everything by hand. The post wasn't thrown around, it wasn't thrown into machinery that sorted it all out. It was all done by hand. So when the CD actually came to the other person's house, it was in kind of prime condition. They didn't realise then that a lot of sorting offices weren't like that. There were probably a lot of gorillas who would throw boxes around and who wouldn't be as fragile with that. But they assumed at the time that that was the way it was in all sorting offices. So that's why they actually ran with the idea of, posting the DVDs in the mail, because they thought it was the same all over the country. And Mark Randolph said that even if they had realised back then how rough the post is treated, they probably would have not even gone as far with the idea of Netflix. And we wouldn't know Netflix now because they would have just called a halt on it back then. So one of the things, as I said, one of the points I have found from it is that sometimes crazy ideas pay off. Sometimes, some idea that might just pop into your head could be the start of a kind of a new arm on your business, or maybe just a complete different business venture you could go off in. Another point that I have found from listening to the audiobook is that you won't know everything. When you look at Netflix now, as I said, you probably naively kind of expect that they knew exactly what they're doing along the way. But as I said, when you are following along with the origin story, you realise that, how they actually only maybe knew the first step of the business, what they needed to do maybe to how to raise money. Then when they had the money raised, then how did they get maybe somebody else to invest in it? How did they get staff? How did they get the DVDs? How did they get a relationship built between them and the movie studio so they could actually get the DVDs off them and they would allow them to rent it out? And how did they build the website? Even back in those days, before the 2000s, there was very, very rare that anybody actually knew how to create a website, and they needed a kind of a tailored or specially built website for renting the DVDs on. And at the time, they hadn't a clue how to, build a website. Everything was done by hand. They had no kind of, nowadays where you can maybe look at Amazon or you can look at some particular website and you can kind of copy what they do, build a kind of clone of their website or their shopping, their e-commerce site or whatever. It's very, very easy to copy that. But in the early days, they hadn't got a clue about that at all. They had to draw everything down on paper. How would they design the website? How would they put in maybe a recommendation so that somebody who rents out a DVD is all going to be recommended these particular DVDs? Or what if that DVD wasn't in stock? What could they recommend instead? And they had to come up with all these different things. And each of those was a kind of a step along the way, a kind of a hurdle that they needed to get over to get to where they are right now. So, it's interesting to see that, a company as big as that hadn't even got a clue in the early stages how to, even do something as build a website. But it was a small hurdle that they had to get over. And, where you are right now, you probably are thinking, well, I don't know how to do this and I don't know how to do that. But sometimes, as I heard before in a saying, if you are traveling all the way from, say, for example, from the east coast to the west coast in America, and you're traveling there and it's all by nighttime, you'll never see the whole way across. If you got your headlights on, you'll probably only see maybe the 10, 15 or 20 feet ahead of the road that the headlights light up. I can't actually see any further than that. But when you actually move that extra 20 feet along, you'll see the next 20 feet and the next 20 feet. And that is the way I'm finding it in this audiobook, that, they didn't give up hope. They came to a hurdle, but, they found somebody that could help them out, or they could maybe take a step to the side or whatever. They could still get round whatever hurdle that was in the way to keep moving forward. And as I said, it's really, really interesting. If you ever have a chance to listen to it, especially like a big business that is as successful as it is, just to see how its origin story, how it was a kind of a crazy idea that came about. And as I said, that they didn't know everything in the very, very beginning. And it's interesting just to kind of look back and, see how that it could have fallen apart at any time, how one person could have said something negative about it that could have made them maybe not follow along in that goal or try and build that business. And because of that, then we wouldn't see the business, the way it is right now, and the many people all over the world who are members of it and watch all the content on it. So, as I said, what can you take out of this podcast? Well, What I'm taking about out of the audiobook is that, sometimes crazy ideas pay off. Sometimes you don't know everything, but that's a good thing because you learn as you're going along. You probably aren't experienced enough to know the next step. But when you get to that part, you probably will gain some experience, or you can find out maybe somebody else who's taken those steps in front of you, and then you can learn off them, and then you can move on a little bit further. But each time you're getting further and further along. And, another thing is not to give up, even though sometimes the odds were stacked against you. Look, even in the audiobook, like there were people who were telling them crazy not to get into the DVD rental market because they seen that it was a short-term kind of thing, that in the future everything was going to go digital, internet connections would probably get a lot faster, and people were actually going to start watching it. And they knew that was ahead. And even though they knew that, they thought, well, there is a small window where the internet isn't up to speed, where people will still rely on hiring DVDs, and that is maybe we can get away with it for a couple of years. But when we come to that hurdle, we will kind of move over to the next part then, which was the digital part of it. But as I said, a lot of times that business could have fallen apart by some of the negative comments that they got. And just to take that into your own business as well too. Sometimes you're not going to have everybody cheering along in the sidelines. Some people are going to say you're stupid, that you don't have the talent, or you haven't got this, or you haven't got that. But sometimes, if you think it's a good idea and you do believe in it, as I said, you don't need to know all the way. Sometimes you just need to know the next step. And when you get there, you'll pick up the next step, or you'll find out somebody else who has done it before you. And then you can simply copy them and follow along behind them. But as I said, if you do get a chance to listen to the audiobook or even just to get the book itself on That Will Never Work, it's a really, really interesting book to get to. But I'll probably do a follow-up podcast in another while when I actually get to the end of the book. And maybe I might have some more lessons to it, but it's been a good listen so far. So as always, if you'd like to reach out to me, if you'd like to get in touch, or if you'd like to know what I am doing, if you head on over to Writecom, that's WRITECOME.com, you'll find a great free report over there at the moment, which is called Words to Wealth. And if you'd like to reach out to me, if you'd like to ask me anything, if you'd like me to cover anything in this podcast, send an email to barryjmcdonald@gmail.com. And as always, thanks for sharing your time again today. Take care. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us today. If you'd like more from the Writecom.com podcast, be sure to subscribe now for more tips, tricks, and ideas you can use to make more money from your words. See you in the next episode.